What's this? A first-person shooter for the Mega Drive? I just won't stand for it. In fact, I have zero tolerance for this kind of thing. Shut up.
Shotgun collected. Handgun collected.
Once Doom rolled around in 1993, the world was very much enamoured with this new frontier of shooting games. It was visceral, fast and undeniably eye-catching with its detailed 3D spaces, satanic imagery and over-the-top violence. But it was a PC game through and through, and until the home console hardware caught up, it was largely an unobtainable thing for those of us who didn't have an IBM compatible. The consoles would eventually get decent ports of Doom, but in 1994? That just wasn't happening. Zero Tolerance by Technopop is very much a game made to take advantage of that hole in the market. It's a gory, intense first-person shooter on a platform that simply will not play Doom without a significant hardware upgrade. Coincidentally, we would later see Doom on the Mega Drive, but only when it came to the 32X add-on later that same year. So Zero Tolerance is delivering a Doom-like experience on a system that had a huge install base, and while this seems like a niche, you have to understand the popularity of Doom. It was everywhere. The first episode was delivered as shareware, and it is reported to have been downloaded and installed 20 million times in its first 2 years. Even if Technopop could take a small piece of that pie with a dedicated FPS for the Mega Drive, it could have a decent hit on its hands. And while there are no firm sales numbers for the game, it was clearly successful enough to greenlight a sequel that was sadly unreleased until 2022. But let's talk about the game itself, because it's a fascinating little thing that punches way above its own weight. Zero Tolerance puts you in control of a small selection of 5 Space Marines who are sent to Europa 1 when it's attacked by an invading alien force. Each Marine basically acts as a single life, and when they die you have to select a different Marine to continue, and your previous character is lost forever. So the setup is a lot like Aliens instead of Doom, and also unlike Doom is the stage design, which is a lot flatter and more akin to Wolfenstein 3D. You see, Doom's biggest innovation is its addition of terrain that showcases different levels of elevation, making for much more dynamic stages that felt like a true representation of a three-dimensional space. Even if they really weren't, because they're actually being drawn as 2D maps and then various elements are extruded from those maps, which is why you can't place rooms on top of other rooms in the Doom engine. Sorry, got a little off track there. Regardless, there is no change in elevation through Wolfenstein 3D, and this is the same in Zero Tolerance, making the comparison more suitable. In each stage of Zero Tolerance, you have to explore the map, shoot enemies, collect ammo, health and other items, and make your way to the exit unscathed. There is no save feature in Zero Tolerance, but you don't have to beat all 40 stages in one go because the game will give you a password if you defeat every enemy in any given stage. However, this is not essential and it's entirely possible to book it to the exit and carry on, but you will miss additional ammo and health by doing so. This gives the game a layer of strategy. Do you risk a firefight with multiple enemies while searching for items, or do you avoid all of that and get out of there to fight another day? Stages are linked via elevators that can take you back to previously explored stages as well, so there's a nice sense of permanence to the game world that stage-based FPSs like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom just don't have. But what is an FPS without its gunplay? Thankfully, Zero Tolerance has some pretty satisfying weapons to use, with its shotgun being a particular standout. It's a meaty, chunky thing to fire with an appropriate sound effect that doesn't disappoint.
Ammunition is low.
The enemies in Zero Tolerance are also pretty interesting to fight because their AI is limited to basically making a beeline towards you as soon as you're in sight. Enemies with guns will open fire when they get close enough, and enemies that use melee attacks will only damage you once they're right on top of you, which will be quickly because none of the enemies in Zero Tolerance are messing around. They hit fast and hard, and the best way of dealing with them is to creep around corners and lure them out individually instead of rushing into a crowd and getting completely swamped. Zero Tolerance is a very aggressive game that rewards a more considered approach, which is also unlike Doom because that game rewards the player for moving a lot and being more aggressive. I think Zero Tolerance is designed this way because player movement is relatively slow in comparison to Doom. Your turning circle is pretty sludgy, which makes dealing with enemies that get behind you a real chore when you need to turn around quickly. The game's performance is also pretty bad, and while I can't find any hard figures, I would say this is operating at below 10 FPS a lot of the time. Them's the breaks when you make a game that requires a lot of sprite scaling on a system that doesn't have dedicated support for sprite scaling. But despite these drawbacks, there's a lot of detail in here that is genuinely quite surprising. Enemies bleed when shot, and splashes of blood will hit the walls and slowly drip down the surface. Enemies killed in open doorways will get crushed when the door closes on them. Any enemy that uses a gun will drop ammo when they're killed. We've even got power-ups like heat vision goggles, a radar that temporarily displays all enemies on the map, and a bulletproof vest that adds additional armour. You can even do damage to some of the walls if you shoot them. These are all little things that give Zero Tolerance a level of polish that goes above and beyond my expectations for a game like this, running on hardware this underpowered. Some have complained that the limited viewing window for the game is a bit underwhelming, and probably done to help the game perform better, and while there is definitely an argument for that, I actually prefer that the HUD is drawn this way because it means that you always get a map of the stage to look at without having to toggle it on and off. This also helps you play the game more strategically, as you can see places on the map you'd like to explore, and you can also see enemies as red dots the moment they're on the move. It all helps benefit the overall experience and makes Zero Tolerance a pretty good little FPS for a console that doesn't really support games of this calibre.